And what's going on with Neocrat? It's not coming up for me when I tried to Google it.
I guess, we're producing so much edgy and radical content that Google have decided to try to deplatform us as much as possible. So the algorithm's working against us.
Do you have the site backed up so you can put it elsewhere?
I generally keep most of my worthwhile content backed up in some form or other, But the site's actually, it's there. You just go to neocrat.blogspot.com and you should see all our splendiferous content.
Yeah, it's not coming up for me, but maybe that's just temporary. So
sort of boomer tech issues, Luke. So you get on top of it.
Okay. What world events have been capturing your attention recently?
Well, what have you been talking about tonight?
I've been talking about side effects in the sense that we usually just think of side effects with regard to medication, but there are side effects to everything we do. If you engage in religion, there are side effects to religion. There are side effects to mindfulness practices. There are side effects.
Harmful side effects.
Yes. I mean, there's almost nothing that you can do that doesn't come with a downside.
How about moderate exercise? Does that have any harmful side effects?
If you mean something like walking, generally speaking, very little downside.
Or
but
like healthy eating, does that have any serious downside?
Well, it depends to what.
I think if you do stupid things, a stupid thing. Why would somebody do a stupid thing? Somebody would do a stupid thing because it has an upside. But because it's a stupid thing, it also has a downside. So stupid things have downsides, and intelligent things tend to have very few downsides. So I think it depends on what you do and how stupid it is. I think that's basically how you have to look at it.
Right. Essentially, for most people, walking there are no downsides, and using good judgment with eating, there are no downsides. But for example, I was raised a vegetarian. To me, the evidence is overwhelming that this is a terribly unhealthy diet. And two, it's tremendously socially isolating. It makes you very unpopular with other people because they have to accommodate that weirdness. Do you have any history with vegetarians?
No, I'm not. I don't come from much of a vegetarian background. Quite the reverse, in fact, being from Scotland, the west of Scotland, one of the unhealthiest diets in the world, apparently. But I've sort of changed my eating habits over the years, like living in East Asia. That also has some impact, and so I think you kind of figure out what's good for you and what's good for your health, and you if you're intelligent enough, you should be going in that direction. And obviously, vegetarianism is a kind of I guess in some ways it's a sort of substitute religion. It's one of those kind of fads that came into being as people started to lose faith in actual religions.
Yeah, it becomes an identity, just like gay is an identity for some people, and then vegetarian's an identity for others. And
it's tribal. It gets to be a little bit tribal, a bit cultish, a bit like left wing or right wing or alt right or dis-right or whatever. Yeah.
So, what political topics are being the forefront in Japan these days?
Well, Japanese politics is not really something that's worth talking about. I tend to think it just sort of ticks along. But this year in general is quite an important year for elections and democracy, and Britain, America, all around the world. They seem to be having elections, and recently in Russia we even had the facsimile of an election. So I find this kind of constant need for rulers to get some sort of popular mandate quite interesting. You even see it in places like China and North Korea. North Korea is basically an Oriental kingdom, but they still can't just call themselves an Oriental kingdom. They have to, pretend they're sort of the People's Democratic Republic of North Korea.
Yeah, people want the legitimacy of being democratically elected, even if the process that they engage in is far from it.
For me, democracy has always been problematic because basically it means giving a lot of weight to the opinions of stupid people, generally speaking, and so this is the sort of audience that politicians have to kind of submit themselves to and pander to.
So in the West, we're seeing a gradual removal of much of life from the political. So it started with removing religion from the political. In American politics, immigration has been largely removed from the political until basically Donald Trump. But before that, the two major parties in the United States and the two major parties in Australia had essentially a tacit agreement that they wouldn't fight over immigration. I'm wondering, is much of Japanese life kind of removed and neutralized from the political?
Yeah, I would say pretty much so. Things tend to be, well, in Japan, there's much more of a consensus about things. And so then it becomes much more of a kind of technical issue. And in Japan is essentially a kind of like most places, most countries actually. I mean, people think that a country like Britain is pretty much an open borders country because they had like sort of like 1 million people coming in the last year and so on. But most countries are actually quite anti-immigration, and I would say Britain's a strongly anti-immigration country. And the reason that it doesn't appear to be so is for all sorts of technical reasons. And in the case of Japan, the Japanese are against they're against immigration like anywhere else, but they have such a low fertility rate and labor shortage, and they're reshoring a lot of their businesses, and so they need to find a labor supply, and so they're finding all sorts of ways to bring people in. And so Japan's a much more kind of pro-immigration country than people perhaps realize. But the people, the democratic masses, they remain like has in any country, opposed to immigration.
Now, Japan has been steadily building up their armed forces. They're supposedly moving towards spending 2% of their GDP on their defense force. The rise of China must be concerning to leaders of Japan. What do you notice about Japan's movement towards taking more assertive role with their own defense?
This is something that's been going on for the last few years, because the real reason I think the Japanese are increasing their military spending is because they no longer regard the United States as reliable. And this is mainly on account of the sort of surprising emergence of Donald Trump as a presidential as an actual president and as a current presidential candidate. So they're thinking, like, even if Trump wasn't around, there is a strong isolationist tendency in America that a clever politician can tap into. There is a kind of logical basis for American isolationism. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea for the rest of the world. I don't think it's a particularly good idea for America. But from an American point of view, it might sometimes seem like a good idea. Why should America be involved in all these power struggles in the Middle East and sort of making sure the Europeans have got it together and so on? There's no obvious direct reason for that. You could find more compelling indirect reasons why America should be involved in the global order. But the Japanese have they've come to the conclusion that America is not quite as reliable as it used to be, and so that's probably the real reason behind Japan's uptick in military spending. And of course, it wouldn't take much for the Japanese to go nuclear, and they would probably be able to put up quite an effective a nuclear umbrella of their own if things came to that point. So I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that a lot of countries around the world are having to kind of step up a bit more because America's been hacked by the Russians, and they managed to effectively destroy one of the two main political parties. They've turned it into this kind of weird isolationist QAnon kind of conspiracy theorist party.
But if Russia had absolutely nothing to do with American politics, wouldn't the Republican Party in America be essentially the same as it is now? I mean, how do you really think it'd be different?
Well, I think the Republican Party used to be much more of a kind of proactive global international order sort of party. They wanted to sort of defend allies and stand by their allies and make sure that, in the old days, the Soviet Union didn't overstep the mark and so on. So I think the Republican Party was a little bit stronger on containing the so-called axis of evil than the Democratic Party. But both parties were kind of committed to America's network of alliances and so on. And we started to see a lot of undermining of that in recent years. And a lot of that has been channeled through Donald Trump. But it's not just since Donald Trump arrived on the scene. I think the Russians realized a long time ago that there was a strong isolationist tendency in American politics, and they kind of figured out that could probably be more effectively mobilized within the Republican Party than in the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party, they have a much more kind of altruistic ethos, which makes them feel they have some sort of obligation to defend all these so-called, inverted commas, lesser nations.
What are the vectors, or who are the vectors for Russian influence in American politics?
It's quite a complex thing what the Russians have been doing, but they've obviously been using the possibilities of social media to kind of polarize various, societies that they feel are opponents of Russian power. And the alt-right was a big part of that. They seem to be quite active on the left side of politics. You have people like Caleb Maupin, who is obviously a complete shield for Russia on the left side. So, and I would even say that the kind of Libertarian Party and the Ron Paul campaign a few years ago, that was a kind of early foray by the Russian deep state to kind of throw a spanner in the works. So I think it's not too difficult to do. If you have a major operation like a country like Russia can mount, then you can have a massive effect on controlling what's trending and what's not. You can use enormous amounts of bots and bot traffic to really boost certain messages and make certain people think that they're getting some kind of purchase on the public discourse. And it's quite easy to use certain very, very divisive issues to whip up various kinds of feelings, which can then be weaponized in various ways. So there's clearly been a lot going on, I would say, certainly since 2014. I think at that time, Russia really kind of decided to go to war in a very metapolitical sense. And there is so much evidence of that. And also you see something similar with China. China has got enormous leverage over somebody like Elon Musk. And you see the way that Elon Musk behaves. And he looks like he's really been kind of manipulated by the leverage that the Chinese have on him as well. So there's a lot of this going on. And the West is much more naive about this. In a sense, our deep states are much more shallow. They're much more hidebound. They're not allowed to break certain rules or do certain things. In a country like Russia, a country like China, their deep states have they have carte blanche to do what the fuck they like, really.
Now, if China invaded Taiwan, would Japan join with the United States and Australia in defending Taiwan against China?
Well, I think the possibility of China invading Taiwan has kind of diminished. And I would say it's diminished mainly because of what we've seen happen to the Russian Navy in the present Ukrainian war. The Russians started out the war against Ukraine quite strong in the naval arena. They completely dominated the Black Sea. They were landing on Snake Island and so on. There was fears of an amphibious landing near Odessa. And it looked like, oh, God, the Russian Navy's coming and, watch out. Since then, of course, the Ukrainians have kind of got on top of the Russian Navy. And they've done this without an actual navy of their own. They've done it using these various kinds of sea drones and highly accurate missiles. And they appear to have destroyed at least a third of the Russian Navy. And the rest of the Russian Navy in the Black Sea is kind of like in hiding. And I think because of the technical evolution of naval warfare that we've seen in just the last couple of years, the Chinese must be drastically rethinking any amphibious invasion plans that they have for Taiwan.
And how much of a threat is China perceived in Japan?
Well, it's bloody massive, and it's right next door. And they're led by this guy, Xi Jinping, who's pretty much he's up there with Stalin and Mao Zedong as somebody who can, call the shots and do whatever the fuck he likes. So there's very few restraints upon the leadership in the case of like North Korea and China. So this is also very concerning. Like if the Japanese prime minister decided to invade some country, a lot of people would be very quick to pull him up quite short. And that's not really the case with China and North Korea and these other societies which are run by these dictator type figures. So there is a lot of potential for China to make trouble. So I think the Japanese have been kind of over-reliant on America to provide suitable backup and security. And like I said earlier, they're just starting to question that and thinking probably time to kind of dust off the old samurai swords again.
Anything about the Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens dust up that has caught your attention?
Not really, no. I think for me, Ben Shapiro is a comical figure, and Candace Owens is this incredibly stupid woman who sort of typifies America, really. The whole of America has been, there's this large section of the American population which is just very limited in how they view the world. So it's kind of quite easy to trick them into believing all sorts of really deeply flawed, moronic, retarded ideas. And, you see this exemplified in somebody like Candace Owens. A few years ago, she seemed like a kind of sensible enough black woman who could grasp some of the key basic political issues and speak on them tolerably enough. And then as part of the dissident right, she's just been sucked into all this kind of QAnon, conspiratard, Donald Trump fucking nonsense, which is practically up there with David Icke at the moment, from what I can tell. Again, the sort of the real thing that underlies everything is it's anti-Semitism or various derivatives or forms of anti-Semitism that these people always kind of latch onto. And for me, I think anti-Semitism is like this big ball of string that simpletons can use to connect up all the confusing pieces of the universe.
And how prevalent are wacky conspiracy theories in Japanese political discourse?
Well, the Japanese have a lot of wacky conspiracy theories, but it doesn't seem to filter into politics quite as much. I mean, there's the kind of Mooney connection and so on, but that's more like a kind of backdoor funding kind of issue rather than people actually believing in sort of nonsense and then acting on it politically. It's much more of a problem in America. We have enormous numbers of people who are literally believing the most crackpot ideas possible.
Yeah. And what's going on with the dissident right, the alt-right, that crosses your attention these days?
I don't know. I think people still get nostalgic for it. It appears. I don't get very nostalgic for it. I regard it as a lot of wasted time and effort, really. But some people do still get nostalgic for it. And I've noticed, you've heard of Walt Bismarck.
No.
He used to do these Disney parody songs with alt-right lyrics.
Okay.
And make funny videos and so on. And he's now on Substack, and he's got this idea of alt-right 2.0, which he's trying to get off the ground. So some people seem to think the alt-right was a good thing. And, I just think it was a kind of wasted opportunity more than anything. There was a legitimate basis for a radical critique of Western society. And it would have happened anyway, I think, this radical critique of Western society, because there are very fundamental problems with Western society and the overall direction of our civilization. But the alt-right came along and kind of glommed onto that and then just grifted off it and exploited it and turned it in all the worst possible directions, usually with the help of the FSB in Russia.
Now, in the United States and in Europe and Australia, there's a lot of conversation about young men seeking meaning and often finding it from podcasts. Is there a thirst for meaning, a search for meaning, particularly among young men in Japan?
Not that I've noticed, no. I think young Western men, they have that kind of crusader spirit when they're young. They want to go out there and, kind of explore the world and challenge the world and remake the world. That's very much a kind of young Western guy kind of thing, or at least it was in my day, and I suspect it still is for a lot of young guys today. They're just full of beans, and they want to show it, and they want to kind of do something on the kind of global stage and make a big difference. And this has been probably one of the secrets of the success of the West over the last 500 years. So I think it is a kind of one of the aspects of youth, really.
So right-wing discourse, right-wing punditry has become increasingly moronic as it appears that the Republican Party has become the low IQ party. I think you'd agree that this is a direction we've seen steadily grow over the past 8 years.
Yeah, I think probably the Republican Party always was pretty moronic, and the people in it were always pretty moronic. But there were enough kind of clever people in the upper reaches who could control it. And then what's happened? You've had this kind of populist upsurge, and that has sort of kind of defenestrated all the more kind of sensible managerial types, the kind of the Mitt Romneys, the Paul Ryans, and so they've all kind of left the party now, and you have all these kind of Trump-tards taken over the party, and they've just sort of turbocharged the the moronic base. And so, yeah, you have this incredibly dysfunctional Republican Party, and it's probably going to go down in flames, I should imagine, in the election in November. There's so many weak points that well-funded Biden campaign with a lot of intelligent people behind the scenes can actually hit on. The Republican Party seems to be heading off a cliff, from what I can tell.
What do you make of the support for RFK Jr.?
It just looks like one of these very highly suspicious third-party operations, so it's hard to say how it will play out. I mean, he could attract a lot of the idiotic people who support Donald Trump, or it could, eat into a bit of the kind of idiotic people who support the Democratic Party. Because, the Democratic Party, it seems to be run by quite clever, intelligent people at the moment, but its voter base is probably just as stupid, if not more stupid, than some of the Republican voter base.
Yeah, we have a lot of leading podcasters in the United States, such as Joe Rogan and Russell Brand in England, and Andrew Huberman in California, who've been coming out and talking about their experiences with God and the need to have religion for social cohesion. How necessary do you think religion is for social cohesion?
I think historically it's been useful for social cohesion. I think the problem nowadays is that nobody actually believes in it. All these people who are grifting off it, they clearly don't believe in it. They just think this is a good way to grift off stupid people. That's why they are suddenly becoming religious. And there are a lot of, sincerely religious people, but most of them are pretty low IQ, I think. But even low IQ religious people, I kind of half suspect they don't really believe in their own religion. I just don't believe in people who believe in religion.
Mm-hmm. And Japan is overwhelmingly a secular nation. Is that fair to say?
No, it's a holy Shinto land with 8 million kamis. So, be careful what you say, Luke.
Is spiritual seeking a passion among many Japanese? Are they finding it in gurus, such as in the West, through yoga gurus or online gurus?
There are a few little odd cults in Japan, but I think the broad mass of the people, they are slightly superstitious. They're slightly deferential to things beyond the kind of material, but they're not. They seem to have a kind of a good material spiritual balance where one doesn't impinge too much on the other.
How has Japanese society been affected by the Shinzo Abe assassination and increasing scrutiny of politicians receiving money from the Unification Church of Sun Myung Moon?
Well, probably not so much. I think everybody was already on board with the idea that Japanese politicians were a bit dodgy in their financing. So I'm not sure that was a big shock for many people that Abe or people in the LDP were getting money from the Moonies. Of course, the unfortunate consequences of this funding stream caused a little bit of a problem. But I don't really see anything fundamental in it. So I don't think it will be a kind of turning point or anything important.
Okay, and the role of sports in Japan, how important is it? We have increasing number of high-profile baseball players now playing for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Japan seems to have highly competitive baseball league. Is the role of sports as a major form of entertainment pretty similar in Japan to, say, England and the United States?
I haven't really given it too much thought. there's a kind of social aspect of sport because when people go to high school and college and they join certain sporting circles and so on, there's that kind of aspect which enhances social cohesion. With most of the big spectator sports like sumo and baseball and the J League, I guess it's just a bit of entertainment. You don't really see people taking it too seriously. You don't really have a big hooligan problem, for example, things like that. Back in Scotland, football's much more of a kind of tribal thing. It's a very, very divisive part of people's identity. It basically prevents a large portion of the population fully assimilating. But in Japan, it's just like a hobby thing. It's just an area of minor interest for most people. I think that's why baseball is the number one sport, because it's a very kind of low intensity sport. Soccer whips up the emotions much more. It's a shorter game. It's 90 minutes. It's much more intense. People get much more excited. With baseball, it has a kind of slow, lazy rhythm, a bit like cricket, really. And that sort of emotional tone is more suitable for Japanese people.
What percentage of the Japanese population would be comfortable with what's called hard right nationalism?
I don't know. We have to get into definitions here, but you could say that most Japanese people are, by Western European standards, kind of hard right nationalists. They're not too much concerned with the rest of the world. They are focused on Japan's interests quite a lot. They're playing the hand that history dealt them, I think.
Do the Japanese, by and large, regard their rulers as operating in their best interest with regard to COVID? I know that there are many Japanese who believe in COVID conspiracy theories, but I assume that the overwhelming majority of Japanese believe that their ruling class did a good job with regard to COVID mitigation.
Oh, I don't know. I couldn't really comment on that. I mean, that would depend on very subtle polling, I should imagine. But the Japanese did have quite a strong anti-vax culture, shall we say, before COVID. I actually wrote something about this, and what I figured out was that the age at which women were having children was sharply increasing. And so one of the effects of women having children later and later is increased autism and other various ailments. And in Japanese society, in order to save face, a lot of these people who were afflicted with this unfortunate outcome, they started to assume that it wasn't because they had got married rather late and had children rather late, but this was because their children had been vaxxed, and so they started to blame it on the vax. And this sort of built up a head of steam in some of the corners of Japanese society, and it led to certain legal cases. And they actually managed to win a legal case against vaccination, and they were paid compensation based upon this. And this frightened a lot of the Japanese pharmaceutical companies, and they decided not to get too heavily invested in developing vaccines. So when COVID came along, Japan was reliant upon other countries for its vaccines.
Okay, Colin, good to talk to you, man. Good to catch up.
Yeah, it's fun to have a chat after a few weeks.
Okay,
all right.
I'll talk to you later, man. Take care.
Okay, cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.